to our second episode for our YouTube channel. It's been 2 or 3 weeks since we did this, but every day changes. So today's discussion is really about the food industry, what we've seen in the midst of this coronavirus. We're not at the end, we're in the middle, the curve is flattening and we keep hearing this, but so what's your take on the food industry and how a whole range of clients are coping in the midst of COVID-19?
Well, for most of the food manufacturers, it's either business as usual or in fact because of hoarding, they've actually got an increase in business.
Yeah, those people supplying to the major retailers are probably very busy, and those supplying to healthcare and aged care.
And as are the retailers, they're all very busy. But when it comes to the food service industry, they've got the reverse problem.
Yeah, and also some of the manufacturers that are supplying to food services, such as people who grate cheese for pizzerias and clubs. And
people who make sandwiches and things like that.
But also people who have specialty meats for restaurants and things like that.
So we've got clients who have their businesses ceased.
Yes.
And will cease permanently. We've got clients who basically are hibernating and not doing anything.
Yes.
We've got clients who are on a severe slowdown.
Yeah, like 10% or 20%.
We've got clients who have never been busier.
Yeah, and supercharging, running 2 or 3 shifts. So we've got the full range out there. It's certainly challenging for people, for businesses, no matter whether you're super busy or whether you're contemplating how you get through this business.
Yeah, because if your business is still trading, you've still got same issues with how you're going to deal with the pandemic at the moment.
Okay, so we've seen a relaxation in some government planning laws, which has been great. Some of those have enabled businesses to maintain operations or to reinvent themselves or come up with an alternative product offering. What are some of the things that you've seen in terms of reinvention?
Well, we've had some of the restaurant chains who have only ever been effectively retail, now doing takeaway.
Yep.
Some of them are doing home delivery for the first time. We're also seeing people who are not caterers or restaurants, people who actually manufacture products doing home delivery, people who have gone online for the first time you can order their products ever online.
Yeah.
We've got one client who's opened a food truck and they've taken their brand into a
That's
food.
clever. Yeah, we are seeing some quite clever reinventions.
Yeah. We've seen, certainly we've got clients who are brewers who are now become distillers and are making hand sanitizer.
Seen that.
We've got people who are supplying markets that never supplied before, notably into the healthcare sector. Certainly places like health departments have gone out and said, can you supply us with a whole list of
aged care.
Aged care. The lockdown has meant some people are no longer preparing in-house and they've now outsourced some of the product. We're seeing a lot more people cooking at home, and that's meant that we've seen not only delivery in the ready-to-eat meal, the home delivery takeaway service, we're also seeing a boom in people buying groceries
and,
so they can
and meals to prepare.
So they can cook at home.
Yeah, I've been doing that too. Okay. Talk about deliveries of meals to homes. A lot of restaurants are now advertising and teaming up with either Uber Eats or Deliveroo, or doing it themselves, delivering ready-to-eat meals. What's some advice to those businesses who are used to serving and cook to order, who are now doing deliveries of ready-to-eat meals to people in their homes?
Well, there are some laws that still said when food's delivered, it's still meant to be below 5. When food is delivered, it's still meant to be above 60. So you've got to ensure when you're doing a delivery, your delivery run, your time is enough to ensure that hot food is still hot and cold food is still cold, frozen food is still frozen when it gets to the other end.
If you can't deliver, say if you put ice blocks in your Eskies and you load up your food and it's meant to be cold, often those ice blocks won't bring it down to less than 5. Can you not use the alternative to our 4-hour storage rule?
You potentially can, but the law still says it's supposed to be delivered cold. So if your stuff came out of your cool room, or your salad or your sandwich when you're making it, and you made it and it was still cold, if you put it into an esky with something like a freezer brick or something and deliver it, it should still be cold when it gets to the other end. The old adage, if you know one of those chains that said deliver in 30 minutes or it's free, part of the reason that was bought in is if you deliver it quickly within 30 minutes, it will still be hot when it gets to the other end.
That's presuming someone's at the other end. What happens when people aren't home?
Well, in most cases, if we're ordering a ready-to-eat meal, we're at home. It's a bit different if there are some examples out there of people who do that. Apart from Woolies and Coles home delivery, people like Light and Easy, U-Foods, Marley's Spoon, but even Meals on Wheels in some cases operate on a model where they drop it off at your doorstep and leave. If you're going to do that, your first thing is find out if the consumer's going to be home or not. And all of those services do that.
And because I've been using one of those services, getting excited about cooking again and getting some different ideas. And they say it's about to be delivered. And then when it's delivered, they send me a text and saying your food has been delivered. So even if it's at 3 o'clock in the morning, I can get up and put it away in the refrigerator.
Having not being the recipient, but knowing people who are the recipients of those when COVID-19's not about. Most of those, the frozen ones are in eskies, refrigerated foam eskies. They usually have freezer bricks. Some of them use dry ice as an option in them. I don't know anyone who delivers hot food and leaves it there for all day.
What about allergens and labelling?
Well, technically speaking, that's all food service, so it doesn't have to label according to allergens. But if you're doing delivered food for the first time, what you need to be aware of is that people can ask what the allergies are, like they can in your restaurant or in your takeaway. So you're still meant
to have the information at the request of the customer.
Correct, but that could be on a website. So it could be that when you're ordering your, satay chicken, it could actually say on the website, here are the allergens in the satay chicken.
Right.
Or it could also be that the person rings the restaurant or looks it up on the website.
So you don't need a nutrition panel, you don't need a fancy label, you don't need, a list of ingredients. It's at the express order of the customer, so it's having that information available.
If we think about currently where you do something, and probably the pizza delivery chains are probably the best example here. If you do pizza delivery, it arrives in a box that says pizza, and there's nothing else on it.
Yeah.
And so the same rules apply for these delivery services. You really don't have to do anything. But one of the things you do need to be aware of, if you are the person making this food, is people can ask you what allergens are in it, and you have to be able to provide that information.
Okay. What about non-ready to eat, like grocery items? I guess that's the same, but some people are even using couriers and Australia Post to send their foods.
Yep, Australia Post is doing it.
Australia Post has never been busier. Their uptake is up by 40%. So
they said on here today, Australia Post being interviewed today on the radio, they said parcels are up by 80%, letters are down by 50%.
Yeah.
So their business model's rapidly changing over.
So maybe businesses could look at grocery items, ambient grocery items and set up an online. It's not that difficult to, even I can do it, set up a website, to sell your food and reinvent.
They're also out there are hubs within big country towns. So places like Wagga, Dubbo, Wollongong, not really a country town, but those bigger centres also have distribution centres in them. And some of those couriers are not delivering from Sydney to Dubbo, they're delivering from Sydney to somewhere else. To a hub. And your bigger guys, that Australia Post and people like that use, they aren't delivering it from your house to someone else's house. They're delivered through multiple networks.
Right. Many businesses had business continuity plans written into their food safety program, and not many would have had business continuity plans that would have prepared for this type of pandemic
Yeah, not
and,
many.
and the turmoil that it's created?
Not many have pandemic. We work with health departments and aged care providers, and they tend to, but even they didn't really prepare for this. You really need to contemplate as part of this that someone is going to test positive in the middle of your factory or your facility, and how are you going to deal with that? And what are the outcomes out of that? During this time, there's all sorts of things that don't quite work. Some of your suppliers have shut down.
Or international supply is difficult to
or
get in.
Or interstate. If the border to your state is closed, it may be that you can't get the packaging or get the food ingredients. You need to look at backup suppliers potentially. And that also applies to service providers. You might have a piece of specialised equipment where you get someone in. We've got one client, for example, whose factory rebuild is on hold because the equipment installers are Italian and can't get in. So it could, if you're looking at something like a calibration service or maintenance of a special piece of equipment or installation, some of those things you may not be able to do because the person who you would normally use is unavailable, either because their business is shut down or they're in an area, and you may need to look up a backup for a service provider, not just ingredients.
Going forward, it would probably make sense to adjust your business continuity plan with the hindsight of this.
A lot of bigger organisations, and we're talking bigger organisations, have an 80-20 rule, where 80% of the business goes to one supplier and 20% goes to someone else. So you've always got a backup person in your system. Now, that if you're a sole trader, that may not be appropriate, but it's always useful to have a backup supplier, particularly in a case like this, because it may be while you still want to continue trading with the same refrigeration mechanic, they
don't want to, or...
Yeah, they may not want to come into your facility. Or they may be in a position, if you're in a border, say you're in Queensland, they may not be able to get to you in northern New South Wales.
Yeah, okay.
Some other things in terms of business continuity as well. If your trucking firm suddenly can't deliver interstate, your staff who routinely travel down as reps or merchandisers now can't travel interstate. How are you going to service clients who are interstate or overseas where you can't get to them?
Yeah, exporters and not being able to export.
Correct.
So it's not only the service, yeah. So we need to also think about things like backup suppliers and not just food but packaging as well, because we've seen shortage of packaging.
Yeah, there are lots of companies here who have all the ingredients to make hand sanitizer but can't get the bottles because the bottles normally come in from a place like China and they can't get them. So backup suppliers not only of food but of packaging and potentially some of the more important services. I mean, when it comes to cleaning, you could always do the cleaning yourself. But when it comes to calibrating or servicing a particular piece of technical equipment, it may be there is only one supplier. And if they're in Italy, you're really in problems during this.
So we're still in lockdown, and no one quite knows when the restrictions will be lifted for restaurants and food service, things like events, tourism.
Yeah, it's going to change. Different states and different industries will have lockdowns taken off at different times.
So these businesses that have either been put into hibernation or are operating on a trickle business, deliveries and pickups and coffees rather than, meals and things like that, what should these businesses be doing to
keep it going?
To keep it going, and there's two questions here. To keep it going, what should they be doing now? And then the second question, we'll come to that in a moment, is what should they be doing in preparation for once the shutters roll up? So what should they be doing now?
Well, your first thing you should be doing now is let your customers know what's happening. if you're still trading and you're still sitting there waiting for orders, contact your customers and let them know you're still trading, nothing's changed.
Yeah.
If you have shut down, tell them when you're going to reopen.
Some signage, adjust your website.
If you've gone to takeaway, let them know. If you've gone to home delivery, let them know. I know in our business we've contacted our customers saying, hey, we're still here.
Well, this is part of it. We're still operating. This is slightly a different way of operating.
We're not sitting in our office waiting for your call, when we're now at home. But we're still available. Your other things you can do, there's lots of things that you often either put off because they're too difficult, or you schedule them annually or less often you could bring forward. Training and retraining of staff falls into this. Some of those things that are required for food manufacturing, things like testing, calibration, internal audits, those sort of things could be...
meetings, review of hazard plans.
All of those things could be brought forward. Lots of people at the moment are reviewing their labels. If they were contemplating doing changes to artwork on their labels.
What about product invention or product development?
Now's the time to fast track product development, look at launching new products. It's the time to sit back and look at your website if you're contemplating making changes, particularly at the moment because the government has a lot of money for capital expenditure. If you're going to update software or hardware, if you want to do repairs and maintenance, if you want to get new equipment.
Now's the time to do a deep clean.
Now's the time to do a deep clean. The government has got money now, funds and tax write-offs to help small and large businesses.
A lot of businesses might have been looking at electronic monitoring or having data loggers in their tool rooms, take advantage of the investment and depreciation write-offs that the government are offering.
Now is even the time, if you're putting a wall up and separating this half of the factory from the other half. Now's the time to build the wall. Go and buy a delivery van. Yeah, potentially you're not doing much at the moment, and potentially you've got the funds from the government to do it. So now may be the time to content some of the projects you put off for a while, or you are planning to do early next year or in 2 years' time, you can bring those forward so that when you do start up again and the full business comes back, which we'll talk about in a sec, you've got all these things already done and you can concentrate on getting your business back up online.
And I think this is an important point at the moment. If we'd said this 2 or 3 weeks ago when everyone's thinking, oh my goodness, how are we going to survive this? That sense of panic and being overwhelmed in the situation has kind of subsided. People are kind of used to this is how it is at the moment, and people should take advantage if they possibly can get in the right mindset of going, okay, what are some of the things we can do, depending on your financial situation, to reskill, re-engineer, revisit, review, adjust, do a bit of housekeeping. Everyone's been on your business rather than just in your house.
Correct. All of the things that you were going to do in 8 months or 12 months time, you can bring those all forwards now while it's quieter. If you're in a position, remember some businesses are flat out at the moment. If you're in a position where you're quieter time, now's the time to bring some of those things forward, particularly while there's government money to do them, and then later on you've got time not to worry about those and concentrate on getting your business back up.
Okay, so let's talk about getting back up. What happens when the government releases and says, as from the next 2 weeks, we're going to allow food service, events, tourism.
Your first thing is there's probably going to be an initial huge wave of people visiting those things again. And even in that means, for example, for food manufacturers, suddenly you'll get huge orders. Because one of the things, if suddenly tomorrow they said restaurants can go back again, well, all the restaurants are thrown out. Everything's in their fridge. They've probably given away all the perishable items. So they're going to have to restock. So it's quite likely early on we're going to see a boom in those items, not just in retail as we're seeing in hoarding. In food service, we're going to suddenly see people ordering massive orders.
Massive uptake.
And so one of the problems you could have if you're a restaurant is some of those things become out of stock quite quickly.
So be aware of short-dated stock coming
Yeah,
in.
your other thing to contemplate is some of the distributors have now got products sitting there that's not being used. So it could come in potentially short-dated.
Which may or may not be a problem for you if you...
Or shorter dated than you're used to. So things like stock rotation become more of an issue. I think one of the big issues is going to be you want 100 products, but everyone wants those 100 products, and suddenly only 50 are available. So it may not be you're able to go online with everything at once.
So you might get a run from a food service point of view on tomato paste and pasta, and that's... Whereas we've seen that in retail.
We've seen it in retail and not in food service. We'll see the reverse.
Yeah.
And we'll see suddenly a run in food service and retail will drop down, potentially.
But also that may be the case for services. Like for us, we've offered a lot of our clients being able to postpone their audit. So some of my clients have had their audits postponed till November, December. Come November, December, I've got my normal audits, and then I've got the audits that have been postponed. So I'm going to be really, really busy.
We'll find that not just in our industry, by a lot of factories, particularly the factories